of society and aid to the rehabilitation of the offender as a law-abiding citizen. The board also has statutory authority to recommend commutation of sentence to the board, right? So that's, and also the Board of Parole, it has these rules, right? And when we specifically look at Rule 6 for early parole, right? The board can provide written recommendation of the department or the court. The board may reduce the minimum term, which must be served before parole eligibility. And then there's Rule 7 and or a medical parole kind of release, right? There's also compassionate medical release, right? And Delaware provides compassionate release to eligible incarcerated folk with serious mental or physical conditions under 2 separate laws, right? And then you have a category of folk that are eligible who are serving sentences for crimes committed on or after June 30th, 1990, may be considered for sentence modification due to illness or infirmity, right? And also eligible individuals for crimes committed before June 30th, 1990, sometimes referred to as the old law, may be considered for medical parole. Then we also had a kind of compassionate medical release, particularly through COVID-19 or during that period.
But what do I hit so they can hear me when I want to speak? I'm scared to scroll over because I don't want to mess up now.
Right, then House Bill 137, right?
Let's mute. Stop video. This is participant. This is chat.
What you done?
Can y'all please mute? I'm almost finished, I promise. Okay, right? In terms of the data set, in terms of where we are, in terms of what we know, right? So we know that there are 700, since 2021, there are at least 785 people incarcerated over the age of 50, right? And we know that at least 187 of these people, that at least 187, nearly 200 folk are incarcerated in Delaware for more than 30 years or more. We know that there are at least 186 males, mostly Black males, surprise, surprise, and there's at least 1 Black female, right? Within that 187 number group, right? So we're looking at race and gender in terms of the 187. We also know within that 187, right? This is how their ages break down. So in terms of how many folk, so we have there are at least 60 or so folk who are in their 50s, 90 or so folk that are in their 60s, right? And 35 or so folk that are 70 or older. So they can be even in there, and there are a few folk in their 80s and beyond. So, right, but this is also what it looks like in terms of race, gender, and age. Now, I think, right, I'm going to show you the criterion in a second that we've worked on, particularly for those folk that we think we should look at more closely. But you know, and one of our characteristics is non-violent cases, and there are a number of them, right? Folk who are in there, right? But nonetheless, there are some violent cases as well that we also are requesting to be considered, right? Hopefully for review. So for instance, when looking at that data set, right, and looking at those 200 or so folk, right, we know that there are at least 11 persons that were convicted for, I did look up this felony right here, but I think it's a type of robbery, but don't give me the line. But there, you know, but the 11 persons that qualify for that crime. There are 5 persons that are convicted for assault. There are 3 persons that are convicted for just carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime, right? Who've done more than 30 years. 3 persons kidnapping, 7 persons convicted for attempted murder, 13 persons convicted for homicide or murder 2, not a murder 1. right? And again, all of these persons have been convicted 30 years or more. So we think, it's important to at least to look at their crimes or their cases more closely, to really look at the circumstances surrounding it. In many instances, we're willing to bet these are one-offs, or the person may or may not necessarily have a huge or long history related to any of these crimes. So, right, but nonetheless, so we're definitely saying nonviolent, but we're also saying there are some violent cases that we may want to consider, particularly of those who've done 30 or more years. Our criterion for release that we're recommending, 30 years or more, age 60 or older, nonviolent but open to violent cases, medical or health challenges, no threat to public safety, potential for being a productive citizen, made positive gains while incarcerated, and we want to hopefully pay more closer attention to folk who may have support awaiting them upon their release. All right, so let me stop there for a second, open it up to the group, just get some initial feedback before we continue. So any thoughts just about what has been shared to you thus far?
Well, I would like to speak. I don't mind
ma'am.
speaking first.
Yes, ma'am.
What you shared actually is a new information to me, probably to a lot of us. What is really concerning is that this the compassion care that they say exists really doesn't exist. That the people who have been incarcerated for over 30 years, even if it had been for a violent offense, there are people who have committed murders that were out in 10, 15 years, even less. And then to try to use those criteria, which they have used in order to keep people. I wanted to think, what was the color dynamic of those ones who were still in there too? I don't think I saw that, because I would be interested in seeing just what the race of the individuals who were still serving time, what that is. And then I also, and this conversation we're having, I'm just so grateful to be having it, because it is truly, truly needed. I was just sent a text of a person who's been in there now, Shabazz, for instance, for what is it, 47 years or so. His mother passed away 98, and I mean, she didn't get a chance to see him come home, even though she held on, basically to see him come home. And he didn't even kill anyone. I mean, he's not in there for a murder charge, but he's been in there for 47 years. And so, I look at this, and I'm looking at the people who are on this Zoom, and I'm thinking about what's going to be the outcome of it all. How long is it going to take for it to happen? Is this just another conversation to compile data for some kind of report that goes nowhere? Or are we really seriously taking this situation and going to make sure that something really does happen to bring relief to these individuals who will die in prison, unless something is done? So, I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm on here because my husband, Kamoko Harris, for instance, gave me a list of like about 7 people back in 2021, that he said have been in there for over 30 years that he knows personally, and that only one of them had actually committed a murder charge. The other ones were in there for other charges, and they're still there, and they're all, in their 70s, a couple were in their 80s, and he just couldn't understand, like, why, no one was trying to do anything seriously to get them out. And then I look back at this situation, and then last year, during the Black History, the news journal, or was Delaware Times, published a story about John Bailey and the Sheila Farrell story, and talked about racism. Well, that's a prime example because he teenage girl who actually picked a peach off of a tree branch that was hanging over the fence. And he literally um, chased her down like blocks and executed her in front of witnesses. And because he had power of having money, I guess, and having some influence and being white and her being a little black girl, the man did what? 17 years max in jail, and they were fighting to get him out of jail after he did like about 6 or 7 years. So he was an execution murder in front of everyone, and he did no more than 17 years and got to be out and be with his family and live his life. And these men who are still down there did nothing. I mean, what can you say justifies his life? John Bailey, you know, he killed the black girl. He does no time. These gentlemen over here, like Squeaky did, he killed the black man. Now we know daggone well they don't care about a black man's life so much that they're going to give this man 51 years. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. And we got to stop having conversations and we've got to actually start doing something that makes a difference. And we've got to stop making excuses about where they're going to go. We don't have a home to put them in. They don't have family left. I guess they don't. A lot of the family's dead because they've been in there so long. What are we going to do to really have an impact and make a difference? The state has so many buildings that are not being utilized. Get one of those damn buildings and make it into a center so we can get these men out of jail. Now I'm going to shut up because I'll get so emotional and I'll start crying about this because I'm very passionate and I really care. And so I'm going to shut up. But Emmanuel is out. I wish he was on this call. If he's not, I don't know if he's.
Yeah,
Emmanuel Redding, for instance, did 47 years.
Richard Smith was supposed to go to his home and set up the laptop there. So I don't see it, but they are here in spirit, and I know they wanted to be here at this meeting. Cool.
Thank you
so much, Miss Harris. Really appreciate that, and thank you for the emails too. Also, just really quickly, because we do have an agenda, but are there any quick thoughts, comments, thoughts about the PowerPoint, or more broader or more general thoughts about this?
Yeah, can I say something real quick?
Yes, sir.
How y'all doing, everybody? Thank you, Ms. Harris, man. So yeah, I agree with you. A lot of these guys, man, they're considered political prisoners. So back in the days, man, and one thing about Delaware that I noticed too, man, they will definitely admit to their wrongdoing. You know what I mean? But it's, somehow in some way, man, it keeps, just falling on deaf ears later on. Like everybody just turn the other cheek or whatever is going on. Nobody's following up. You know what I mean? So this, I'm quite sure, with this movement right now, we have to follow up. We have to hold them accountable. We have to be, what I mean? They have to know what's going on and that we really care about, our brothers and sisters. That's over. It's called overkill. You know what I mean? I was down there with all them good brothers, man. A lot of them brothers gave me a lot of inspiration, a lot of knowledge and wisdom. You know what I mean? To be out here making the difference that I'm making in the community. You know what I mean? So yeah, we just got to move and keep moving together and in solidarity, man, to make things happen. Like you said, Sheikh Ali, that's my big cuz. You know what I mean? It's a blessing that brother made it home, but it's more to come. We got to make sure them other brothers, man, brother Shabazz, he's blind right now. And it's countless others, man, that like you said, that haven't killed nobody. Mr. Payne, them brothers need to be home, man. They need to be home with their families. Mr. Payne in particular, he was down there, bucking against the racism. And he's still in there because he was bucking against the racism. You know what I mean? So yeah, it shouldn't be no no's or none of that. It should be yeses. And these brothers should be coming on home, and we'll figure out the rest later when they get here.
Right.
Sure that good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I just want to make a couple of comments on my brother Tyre, aka
Yes, sir.
Ronald Payne. That it's time. I knew about compassionate release, but they always try to tell me that it was for those that were sick or had certain different things I didn't know about the other part of the compassionate care. So thank you for that data, learning that. And a lot of people were putting out false information that Tyre doesn't want to come home, this, that, and the other. And I'm the brother that goes down there and see him. Plus, I'm not going to call any names and make no waves, but I know people that work there in the prison. And some of those guards that are now retired or gone or what have you, then they left a record. Oh, like my brother's supposed to be so much of a bad monster. Even one time when I went down there to visit, one of the guards, and mind you, black at that. Now, I know, you should be colorblind, but he was up in the place where I guess, the little cubicle up there where they let the people in and out to go in and out of prison. And then when I went to go see my brother, putting in my license and this, that, and the other, the lady didn't see my time or whatever. Something was mixed up. And I had to give her his name again. So then she finally found it. But the guard that was up there had the nerve to make the remark that was in the little house where you can't see him at. Well, he's a lifer. He's a lifer. My brother is not a lifer. He's never done anything to be in there for life. His original charges was supposed to be in 1 year, and it was 5 years and 1 probation. But then when he got in there, a little skinny 18-year-old kid, as they said, bucked the system, bucked the racism, got in fights, got in arguments with the guard, which landed him with all those charges. Then Bill Clinton and Joe Biden, hate to say it, came up with the 3 strikes you're outlaw. Well, he never been on the street to even be charged with 3 strikes you're outlaw. All his charges came in with those guards, and those guards are still nitpicking with those brothers that are there right now. And from time to time, that's why he stays to himself, try to keep his business to himself and what have you. And I've even had people that work there said they've even mentioned to other colleagues, we got to help this brother get out. Oh, do you know what he did in his day? Do you know? That shouldn't even be. He shouldn't have to come up against that. But my brother's hearing now is getting kind of, shallow now. I can see him now. He's not the same young brother that I used to go see and take my mom to see, and me and my other family members go down to see. His steps is getting a little, slower. And it's time. It's past time. 52 years. He went in when his daughter was a baby. She is 52 years old now. 52 years is time for him to come home. But if he gets sick in there, is what I keep telling him. If you get sick in there, hurt in there, they're going to want to ship you home to your family. And it wouldn't be fair after he get beat up and broke down so bad that he can't come home and we have to wait on him hand and foot and take care of him. So that's why I'm saying that from the warden to the government on down, those guys that have been there like Ronald for 52 years need to be sent home. They need to have some kind of compassion, some kind of empathy. If they don't have no sympathy, they need to have some kind of empathy and say, hey, enough is enough. I forget the lady's name that wrote the book. If those of you that can get it or get it out of the library, it's called The New Jim Crow Movement. Delaware is stated one of the hardest and most racial judicial system and penal system in the country. And of course, many people that know history know that Delaware is considered the first Southern state. So from Sussex County on down, we're the first Southern state, and we sure show it when it comes to the penalization, especially of Black incarcerated men.
Cool. Thank you. That's Tracy Murphy. That's the brother of Ronald. Tracy
Payne, Payne. My mother only had one husband. All of us are Payne.
The older brother,
I'm thinking about Tracy Murphy.
Payne.
Tracy Payne, the brother of Ronald Payne or Tyre. Tyre's been incarcerated since 1969, right? And like Mr. Payne just said, for 52 years. So this is who we're talking about. All right, I'm going to move us along. Next up, I want to transition us into a discussion on services, right? Services available for, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, we need to get them out there come hella high water, but nonetheless, one of the things that themes that kept coming up in the multiple conversations we've been having over the last few months is, at the end of the day, what's available, what institutions, what services, what do we need to be thinking about, what can we think out in terms of the future, and what can we think in terms of services that will be required, that will be necessary, particularly for folk coming out who are older and or who may be sick, right? So one of the conversations I had was with State Representative Carrie Evelyn Harris. And we talked a lot about this issue, had a wonderful lunch, but she also was one of the people that really talked a lot about services in a way that it really hit me, and meaning that we do kind of think this out loud, and or we would be naive if we did not think this through. But State Representative Harris, can you briefly share some thoughts, some remarks on services and or what kind of services may be needed to assist folk who are older and who may be released? Here, is she here? She is here. Okay. I don't think she heard me. All right. She may be caught up. I know she is dealing with a family, and she does have a family circumstances she's dealing with. So nonetheless, Dr. Ann Aviles, we're going to transition to you. Are you there?
I am here, yes.
Okay, cool. Can you talk to us a little bit about housing? That's definitely come up in a number of the meetings that I've had. What does housing look like, particularly for those folk? And we're thinking about those folk who may not have family, and or what are housing opportunities like in Delaware?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ann Aviles, as Dr. Payne said. I've been working on issues of housing here in Delaware since about 2017, 2018. And unfortunately, the housing options are extremely limited. I'm just going to start right there. There is, from my awareness, and I do see there's some DCJ folks on here, there is a pilot program that was developed in 2019, 2020, because many times for people coming home, especially for those who have family that are in public housing because of their either felony or a background, they were barred from public housing. And so there is a pilot program. I don't know how much it has been used, but the goal is that when someone comes home, if they have a family member or person that can host them in public housing, then they can go into housing. Their income will not be used against the household. If you know the way public housing works, right? A percentage of your income goes towards your housing. And so if you bring someone else in the household, then the government basically counts their income towards your housing, which can then raise the amount of money you have to pay. So with this pilot program, the person coming home, their income would not count against the household if they successfully, and I say successfully in quotes, basically, if they follow the rules, adhere to the program, within a year, then they become eligible for public housing. Unfortunately, right now, public housing, even that is super limited. There are lists where people wait 1, 2, 5 years to get into housing, and they're often in shelters or staying with family and friends until that housing can happen. In terms of private housing, so basically private landlords, there is nothing, quite honestly, something that we've talked about. So I work with the Homes Campaign, Housing Opportunity, Mobility, Equity, Stability. And so something we have talked about internally with Homes is having, similar to employment, where we ban the box on, a felony when people go to fill out a job application. Could we develop or adopt something like that here, right, in the state of Delaware, where people's, right, if they serve their time, then they should be able to come home and get access rather than this kind of stain on their record being used against them and barring them from housing. And what we know from national data is that the first month that someone comes home from prison is crucial in terms of providing them that stability. If they do not get housing, if they do not get a job within that first month, it's very likely that they will recidivate, right? That they will end up going back to prison. So it's really, really important that we think about that first month and really securing housing and opportunity for people when they come home. I can stop there, Dr. Payne. I can say more, but I think that at least gives us an overview.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dr. Aviles. Any questions? Concerns, thoughts for Dr. Aviles related to housing?
If I could say something, Corey, or Yazir,
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, one of the problems with the housing situation is that you have about 5,000 people in Delaware that have HUD vouchers that can't find a place to live. And one of the problems is that the money's not being made available for people and businesses like my own that are interested in buying these vacant houses and fixing them up and then reselling them to low-income people. You know, whether it's rent to own or whatever. You know, the funding is, it's kind of messed up the way they're doing it, because like Newcastle County just got a lot of money a few months ago, and I submitted a proposal that would, for about $3 million. They told me it wasn't enough, that they were looking for bigger projects. So I mean, that kind of stuff, you know, eliminates small businesses and individuals that are interested in improving legal or living conditions of our poorer people. And something needs to be done. I brought this issue up in numerous Zooms before, and there really hasn't been any movement on it. You know, Matt Myers, he's running for higher office. Maybe he'll get on it. But the people need to know that if the laws that are on the books were enforced the way they were intended, the way legislators, like the legislators that are on this panel, passed the law, 2/3 of the people in prison wouldn't be there. I mean, when Floyd was tragically killed, there were 6,500 prisoners statewide. After he was killed, they started reducing the prison population and the sentences. They're down to 3,500 people now. That means that half the prison population shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Mm.
You know, to make a 50% reduction in 3 years is a hell of a leap. You know, so, and I raised this issue at the last Council on Corrections about the 4217s. Why the Department of Corrections, it's the counselor's responsibility to identify people to put in for sentence modifications, and they're just not doing their job. You're telling me out of 3,500 people, you can't find a half a dozen every month to release on a sentence modification? We all know that. We know the character of guys in the prison system and how much you change over the years. I mean, you talk about Payne being in there. I mean, here's a man that grew up in prison. George X is on the panel here. He went to jail when he was a juvenile and then went to the adult joint. You know, I mean, there has to be some accountability of why the laws on the books are not being enforced the way they were intended, rather than creating a bunch of new laws that they have to go ahead and try to interpret.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can I ask, Mr. Walls, where are you from? What organization, when you said that you were looking for funding to for more affordable housing?
Yeah, I was in prison for 35 years. I'm a veteran. I'm 100% disabled with PTSD. And the veterans, the older guys that were in prison, helped me understand that I had PTSD in the first place and then seek treatment for it. And I owe them, the veterans in prison and some of the other older guys in there, who saved my life.
Right. Right.
helped me direct my life towards a positive avenue. So when I got out of jail, and the whole time I was in there, I said, when I get out of jail, I'm going to create an organization called Veteran Services that is going to be focused, laser focused, on getting these courts, the judges, to make decisions based on the law rather than their personal political ambitions, right? And that's what I'm doing. Now I'm in the process of buying houses, and it's a stretch to buy the house and then dump $30,000-$40,000 in it to rehab the house.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Smyrna, we have a 4-unit building right now that had some water damage, and I'm fighting with the insurance company about that. But we're planning on using that to, once we get it refinanced, we're going to use the money to buy more units. We're looking at a place now on 9th and Madison, I think it is. It's 639 West 9th Street. Was a boarding house. It's all boarded up. But, you know, there are people like me all over the state that really want to do stuff. But we're being hampered because we don't have access to the funding. The Small Business Administration won't help. The all ARPA money and CARES Act money was denied to us. So we're kind of like stuck. But I grew up in Wilmington, you know, and on the east side. I was born on Hutton Street. Spent the first 10 years of my life on East 26th Street. So I've been around, and I will continue to be around.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So I just got a chat and or request for everybody. If you can, please just write in the chat your organization. So there was a request for me to ask everyone here on the Zoom meeting to just type in your organization. Folks just want to know exactly who's in the room and all that good stuff. All right. So State Representative Harris, are you back?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry, everybody, if you hear noise in the background. I'm in the ER with my father. But you know, this is important to me, as Dr. Payne knows, and I know it's important to all of us. And you know, when we were sitting down and talking about this, I just wanted to make it a point that we remember how important the services, wraparound services, are going to be when people get relief. Everybody, if I'm not gonna say when this happens, there are going to be people out there waiting for it to fail. And the easiest way for it to fail is for us to not make sure that there are the services that are needed, healthcare, making sure that there's housing, making sure that there are there's a sense of community to make sure that people thrive in this release. As we all know, any of us who have family members who have spent large amounts of time in jail, there is a transition back, and we don't want them to feel like they were better off where they were, and we don't want the naysayers to say, "See, we told you so," if they happen to recommit a crime. In addition, I did have a question about the criteria, which is that going to be something that would be all of those numbered items would be a requirement, or would it be a scaled system? And I'm asking, the one that really stands out to me would be the part about being a productive member of society, and that's pretty subjective. You know, and especially if people are getting out with health issues. If somebody might say, you know, they can't contribute, and health issues can be anything physical or mental. And I just want to make sure that we're not limiting people based on not being able to meet every single numbered item on that set of criteria.
Yeah. So yes. To answer that, these are just all the ideas that kind of came. Definitely, I don't think it's a static and or set list. That's a living criterion, meaning it can evolve and change at any given time. I think no one person has to meet all characteristics and vice versa. So but those are the kinds of ideas that came up from folk that I chatted with. And yes, I agree. What being a productive member of society means is very subjective. It's also depending on resources and all that good stuff. But you know, there are some folk that demonstrate just from their activity on the inside and or the change and evolution over time, right? They signal strongly just the kind of returning person that they would clearly be. So just that, I think that was just more so language for folk that clearly meet the high mark of a very subjective label. Yes, yes, yes. But meet the high mark of, just being a really good contribution or and or carrying the potential to make a really strong contribution to society. So, but again, that language can get swapped out. These are just ideas. I'm just from speaking with everyone, I decided to put in a PowerPoint slide. I want this to be really a conversation between us all. I want us to figure out what that list should look like, how that criterion should look. I'm speaking with Mr. Sheikh Ali about this very issue, and Richard Smith and Pastor D. They made it very clear that they think community, and I think in the slide I put language there too, but that a set of members from the community and or maybe from this group, when we get there, right? Because we're going to get there. But in addition to kind of more formal state or city officials being involved with identifying and critically evaluating and seeing who, right? There should be a set of folk from the community, folk who've been previously incarcerated, that should also be involved in looking at some of the extenuating circumstances surrounding the cases and or persons that may potentially get released, but also a group that helps also assemble and think through the language for who would even meet the qualifications. What a group of folk from the community who can help think through the criterion. So I want this to be as participatory, because that's what we do. Even this particular experience here, we want this to be as participatory.
Yeah, this is Coley.
Yes, sir.
Real quick, I had a conversation with Brother George, and just hearing Joe Walls speak, and some of the other guys. These guys been down there dealing with that, fighting against issues, particularly like with good time. The guys with old law and stuff, how the prisons interpret the laws, how they handle and manage 4217, and the lack of the effort behind that. I was recently working with the Public Defender's Office. There's some data that came across my desk like in 2019. I think that, don't hold me to this, either throughout the state or it may have been Vaughn, but 19 people within a whole calendar year out of 4,000, whatever, however many inmates it is, were even allowed to go through the 4217 process. It's a gatekeeper type of system. But what I argued with some other people, legal minds, is that I would like to see a work group come together, particularly with people, and you have to include the individuals who have the historical knowledge of these laws. Some of these individuals are on this call who have the historical knowledge of these laws, the spirit and the implementation of these laws. I would like to see that, particularly with some of the professionals. I see some professional organizations on here who have attorneys that I would like to see if we can possibly form a work group. But you have to include the gentlemen, the men and women on this call who have that particular historical knowledge about the laws in the state of Delaware.
Okay, cool. All right. I want to transition into just really quickly. Let me just show this before I introduce them. But one of the things we want to talk about briefly today. Goodness gracious. Oops. Oh, Jesus. One of the things we're going to talk about is calling for a state resolution, right? Idea proposed by State Senator Brian Townsend. But when he said it, it rung. And for me, it also can have, that's a way of establishing real legs for what we're talking about, right? But more specifically, try and get this resolution in by the end of June would be the goal, right? And to closely evaluate those 187 with community members, 187 cases, right? Particularly of those persons who've done 30 years or more, and release of inmates who meet serious health concerns. Robert Saunders, for instance, right, who writes me the most from the inside about this issue now for a few years, right? I believe he is in his 80s, right? I think he's been
It's like
incarcerated.
89.
I think he's been incarcerated since the 1970s, right? And I think he's on dialysis. He gets dialysis 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Right? He's
they gave it to him.
clearly not a threat to society. He was president of NAACP on the inside of Smyrna. That's how I first started going in Smyrna, through Robert Saunders, also through Nick Middlebrook, who was vice president at the time. Nick is on this call. Mr. Saunders is still incarcerated. Mr. Saunders and I still write each other. And he's getting sicker and sicker. He sent me all of his medical records. And I was like, wow, you know. So again, you know, so with that said, I want to transition to now State Senator Townsend. Do you have any thoughts about the state resolution and or other thoughts as well as it relates to this issue?
Sure. Thank you very much, Yasser. It's always an honor to join you on anything. Appreciate everyone coming together. Some good friends and some fellow troublemakers on the call. And I'm very glad that you know, we had talked before that you've continued looking at this and it's come to today. I guess I'll jump right to the resolution point. I think that I had kind of thought that at the end of the day, Governor Carney and the executive branch have the key role here ultimately. He has sort of authority as a governor to make a whole lot, I mean, pardons and commutations and all of that. And so I think my thought had been that a resolution from the legislature passed by both chambers by June 30th, using the strongest language that we feel would be productive, you know, encouraging, requesting, et cetera, Governor Carney to adopt this approach of looking at all these different individuals and encouraging him to, you know, to arrange for their release. Would be something that we could do on a short timetable here, but also could be not only impactful, but it really might ultimately be the absolute best thing we could do anyway. Because even if the legislature went more than that and passed a law, not just a resolution, but like a law, the governor would still have to sign it. So we really need him on board with the idea. And so I guess, you know, seeing the materials you presented earlier, Yasser, the national group, I think it was, that had that webpage, or if you could forward all that to me. I mean, basically adapting that language and kind of doing a resolution that just is pretty concise, but breaks out sort of what we're talking about and why. Maybe put in some of the Delaware statistics about numbers of individuals who are in these categories, particularly by age, undoubtedly emphasizing the racial inequities shown clearly by the demographics. And I think, to quote the great Dr. Yasser Payne, surprise, surprise. And putting that out there and encouraging the governor, requesting the governor to undertake an analysis and prepare for release. I believe we can and should do that. Whether it includes additional language about some of the additional services that Representative Harris had mentioned, whether it includes language encouraging the governor to do this in coordination with the community, or even more so, like, you know, language establishing a specific like body and with specific membership. In some ways, I think the more detail we get, maybe the more difficult it is to do this on a short timetable here by June 30th, and the more that it might be frustrating to people who might, you know, want to kind of then all of a sudden have a big fight over how big the group is and who's on it and all those different things. So sometimes less is more and sometimes more is more. So I don't have a definitive kind of thought about some of the elements of wraparound service mentioning. I wouldn't want it to lose momentum on this by June 30th by having people look at the mention of wraparound services and then perhaps selectively choose to think that it would cost more to do this, when in reality it would cost less, but more importantly, obviously be more humane. So I don't know. I think favor the less is more approach, but I'm happy to be re-educated on that. And then I think the good thing about a resolution is you could pass it literally in one day through both chambers if you have the political will to do so. And I would think that with some of the fantastic legislators on this phone call, on this Zoom, that we would have the will to do so. I don't think it would be that controversial to lay out a resolution that explains the merits behind this and then says, and I think ultimately appropriately so, to the governor, you're the one who's got, the ultimate authority to really make this happen. So there's no doubt that that's true by June 30th. I think it's still true even if we had a longer runway. But that was my thought, Yasser, was that really making this an issue and highlighting the merits of compassionate release and encouraging the governor to undertake an analysis of it and move as quickly as he can, I think would be something that might achieve some real progress for some of these individuals who deserve it and have deserved it for a long time.
Sir, yes, sir. Cool. Really appreciate that. Any thoughts, comments, ideas related to State Senator Townsend's remarks or state resolution?
Can I just caution about one thing? The 4217 talks about serious illness or infirmity. And one of the problems is they're interpreting the term serious to basically mean like stage 4 cancer or something like that, where you're going to be dead before you get out anyway, because it takes a year just to run through the process. I mean, there are cases where they've released people, the parole board, overnight that I've seen. And so if the will is there, the laws and the reasons to release people are there. You just got to put the two together.
So, okay.
And actually, Yasser, if I could real quick, I want to know, this is more of like maybe a technical point, but I want to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's, is that ultimately I think the governor plays a key role here, but we have the Board of Pardons. And so it's a matter of figuring out, like, I think typically, or if not universally, the Board of Pardons has to be involved in a process of submitting a recommendation to the governor before the governor can choose whether to ignore the recommendation one way or the other and grant a pardon or a commutation. And the issue is figuring out, legally speaking, how to, and I apologize, looking at any existing law that would allow any of this relief anyway. And I understand Joseph's point about some of that. Or if we're talking about adopting a new law to make sure it happens, we could do that too. Probably not on the June 30th timetable, but I don't know how long this would take anyway. I mean, certainly 12 months is plenty of time. Maybe it's shorter than that, but my guess would be that kind of figuring out the logistics and the political will and all of that over the next 6 months between July 1st and December 31st. And then if need be, passing a law in January of next year to like extend the governor's authority to do it unilaterally if need be, or just make it like a sweeping system. We can figure all that out. I just wanted to mention that there are legal requirements we have to abide by and take into account. But fundamentally, this is more an issue, I think, of compassion or empathy, as others have said. And if you have the will to look at these individuals in that way and to acknowledge the merits of their release, we can figure out the other part. But that's what I think really the first steps are, is like really try to force the issue of please look at them as individuals, please understand the circumstances, and then let's figure out, the legal steps needed. We can, that part is the easy part.
Gotcha. Cool. Ms. Harris, you want to say?
Yeah, Brian sort of touched on what I was going to say as far as immediately what we can do, because we're looking at a situation where we really can't like belabor on the time's sake here, because some of these men are like very ill.
Yeah.
So us taking an approach that's going to create it being these different stages where time is passing, and us losing some of them would just be to me absolutely cruel. So we know we're going to have to get some laws in place, and we're definitely going to need legislators to work on pushing this, but we're going to have to first and foremost get people to look at them as human beings. Because the compassionate care, the compassion is the part that's been left out, because how can you say compassionate care and nobody's done anything all this time to get these guys out? I mean, it's no secret they've been there for years. You talked about yourself of being aware of this. Everyone's been aware of it. Unfortunately, I never really paid too much attention to it, and until my husband brought it to my attention, and I started thinking about that. And I think maybe me having had a great loss created such a passion in me to want to see something done for other people in that area. So we need to get laws. We need to have that. I think some kind of resolution or something being put. We need to have some information written. I mean, I know we're going to have people that are going to be challenging it. There's going to be opposition because some people just believe that, you know, when you're in jail, you get what you deserve and you need to be there. But I can't help but feel that the better good in human beings to look at this and to see the amount of time these men have spent in jail and then their current condition and then looking at the laws and why they were there and then let's, like I said, and me myself, the fact that you can just see a child executed and think that, well, we're not going to talk about that. And it was around the same time we put these guys in jail. I mean, it's just unimaginable. So, Brian, I'm so glad you're on here and you're doing something. So you just really put a smile on my face. I just thank you for that. And I've been talking with Marie and Mimi, you know, so much. They know my concerns about this because I was, you know, crying the blues of them, you know, about it as well. So I'm just so happy, but I don't want us to leave this call without us having a plan or like a start. We've got to say, this is what we're going to do from this call right here.
Yes, and that's where we're at right now, next steps. But let me just first ask the question, but we're transitioning to next steps. Let me first ask the question, what does putting forth a state resolution, what does that process look like? Senator Townsend, like, what do we have to do? Whose office would have to do it? How do we get together on language? Like, let's get into the nitty gritty just a little bit.
Sure, and as we're doing this, I've been looking at the state constitution. Article 7 lays out the fact that this is constitutional language that the governors can't act until the Board of Pardons acts. But I think, again, the point is that the governor's got to be on board ultimately anyway. And so I think that basically the resolution that would expand a little bit in charge both the governor and the Board of Pardons to look at this through with fresh eyes, this new lens of compassionate release. I'm going to next look up the statute for the Board of Pardons and figure out, like, are they fully equipped right now to take this on, or do they need any kind of statutory relief or otherwise, you know, to facilitate a process? It also maybe the process exists right now, and what you need is a community and some resources, some legal resources to say, hey, you know what, the process is there. We just need to like focus on it now. We need to use the tools now. So, I mean, today's Friday. I would think, you know, I'm happy for this to be my weekend to look at this and try to figure out what kind of tool is it. We need to create new tools, or the tools there, and we just got to pledge to use them. But I think that the resolution, and I'm not trying to, like, it's not taking a shot at the governor. It's just like, you know, look, that's, you know, the executive branch, the entire apparatus. And I have to believe that the Board of Pardons, for those who don't know, is made up of the Chancellor, the Court of Chancery, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, State Treasurer, Auditor of Accounts. So you know, I think it's chaired by Lieutenant Governor. I think how long, I believe she's the chair. But so you got 5, you know, individuals who are either elected or statewide appointed, you know, it's those 5. So we can engage with them directly as well and just sort of figure out what the process would have to be. But I just, you know, and Mimi and Marie, and I think Medina's on. I can't remember if anyone else is on. I apologize if I'm forgetting anybody. But we all turn into pumpkins on July 1st as legislators, right? Like, you can legislate a whole lot up to June 30th. And then July 1st, you lose your ability to, like, you know, pass a law until next January, basically. So there's a lot of sensitivity and time urgency heading into June here. And I just want to obviously try to make sure we get this right. And so it's, I think, Yasser, and by the way, you know this, please call me Brian. This Senator Townsend stuff does not work between me and you. Please, I think figuring out what process you want as like, I think the group leader today, you know, we can definitely get language for people to get feedback on, right? This isn't going to be like a box where we just disappear into and come up with language, and then basically, you know, get the feedback. I'm sure having language and content about what compassionate release is important. It'd be wonderful to cite to any studies that show how successful it can be. That would be great. right? From like a, does not increase crime and all these things. And then I think the data about Delaware, which you already have, I think that's important too, to kind of give a sense of what we're talking about here. Again, both from an age perspective and then a racial and equity perspective. And that's the key, I think, to tee it up. But yeah, I think trying to figure out, I guess like we're not talking about changing the law. We probably don't have time to do that by June 30th, although I believe me, I will talk with Mimi to see if maybe I'm wrong about that. We get both chambers on board, maybe it's okay. But I don't know if we have to change the law before June 30th anyway, because it's going to take like such a time to really, fully go through this process. And as long as people want to commit to it, I think it's much more kind of a matter of framing it, like why it's important. Please look at it, Governor. Please look at it, Board of Pardons. Please look at it, whoever else needs to look at it. DOJ, I had to go double check who has a role in the existing process. Because we can't change the Constitution in one swipe. It takes two swipes. It would be now and then January 2025. We want to move much faster than that, obviously, for Mr. Saunders and for others. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop there. If you want more technical nitty gritty than that,
that's perfect. That's perfect. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to circle back, particularly with, the politicians that are in the space now. I'm going to circle back with an email for us to kind of think through, a process of figuring out language for that. But I heard you definitely. I need to be looking up studies on compassionate release. We also have the data from Delaware as we put together. So there's some areas that we can begin curating as we speak. But I'm going to circle back. You're going to get an email from me, all of you, or the 4 or 5 of us in this space. So we can begin just moving that along. The other thing I want to do is this. Please, I'm gonna leave my email address in the chat. And for those of you, because there was a group email going out, number of you in here, so the number of you are on it, number of you in here, however, are not. I want you to feel free to send me your email address. I think at the end of the day, yes, we have to establish a work group. I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to put together the resolution. We have to make sure we're on the same page and get the language together by the end of the month. I think that, at least from my perspective, that is the priority. I think we need to simultaneously create a work group, and this can begin the beginning, meaning folk that are here of this work group, and we can work on a number of different things, like looking at the draft of the resolution as that's coming together, and remarking on that in kind of like real time. Right. So I'm going to, just for those who don't have it, I'm going to leave my email address, and I want you to send me an actual email so I can get you in my compassion release email folder. I want you to also feel free to reach out to me about any other thing, question, maybe you want to chat on the phone, or whatever makes the most sense to you. And so we can fold your ideas and your perspectives, into this movement. All right, I'm gonna stop there. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns?
Can I say one thing? Senator Townsend, you brought up the Constitution about the Board of Pardons. One of the things that Constitution says is that you have basically a right to a public hearing before the Board of Pardons. It says public hearing. And the governor, back in, I believe it was under Markell, came up with this thing called an administrative review board, where they basically sift through everybody's petitions and eliminate anybody that has a body charge or a rape charge, any kind of a sex charge or a body charge. You're not getting in front of the pardon board. Now, even Kathy Jennings admitted to a group of inmates that administrative review board process is illegal because it denies people the right to a public hearing before the Board of Pardons. The reason they created that board was because when they passed truth in sentencing, they eliminated parole. So the only way guys could have any relief was to go to the Board of Pardons. So many guys started going to the Board of Pardons, they had to put this other board in there. It's like a mini board. And they go through your stuff and decide whether or not you're going to get a full hearing, a public hearing, as the Constitution requires you to have. So they need to really eliminate that administrative review board.
I mean, I can double check. I'm not sure if that review board is a replacement for the Board of Pardons, because if so, I agree that then there wouldn't be the public hearing that you're entitled to. I sort of vaguely recall that might have been set up to try and facilitate other forms of relief. And that's the thing I want to do, Yasser, is make sure that, like, if there's a quicker form of relief, like, great. But I still don't think we'd have time to change the statute necessarily. I think it's just a matter of figuring out kind of what is the quickest way to do this. And as I think about it, it's like, you know, we're directing this not just to the governor, I mean, it's literally the entire 5-member Board of Pardons. It's almost like a, hey, we're coming, you know, and here's why we're coming. And we hope that when we arrive that you are open-minded and open-hearted, right? And I you know, looking at this language now, I don't think that there's any kind of like chance of a sweeping sort of like, hey, the governor pardons, you know, 100 people. I think it's got to be 100 people submit an application or petition to the Board of Pardons. But when they do, it's like, let's have those individuals be mindful of, I it was maybe a bunch of years, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I did a little bit of interaction with the Board of Pardons. I'll double check about whether any of them look at you know, compassionate release right now. But if they do, clearly it's not like from a systemic perspective, right? It's not like a sweeping effort we want to talk about here. So we'll square all that away in the coming days to figure out how best to frame it, given whatever the truth is of what.
Okay. All right. Sounds like a plan. One more time. Again, I'm going to reach out to Brian and Pope. And we'll get that ball, you know, just started just on some, you know, the language of resolution. Also, send me an email because I want to begin to really assemble and identify who's going to be part of this working group. Let me know if you're interested in being a part of the working group, and feel free to also reach out to me about if you have a question or any other aspect of compassionate release. Right? Okay. Any other thoughts before we go?
I just want to thank you for having this hearing and allowing me to attend it. And
thank you for joining
us. I wish us all the best luck going forward, and everybody be safe.
Thank you for joining us. We got to do this together. Together, you know, we have a better chance of creating real change. David Beaver, do you have anything to say? DCJ, I just want to know I've been working closely with DCJ, Kaylin Richards, Natalie,
absolutely,
just thinking stuff through. And I meant to call on you earlier, David.
It's okay. I was actually calling our Deputy Executive Director, Jessica Alisea, earlier because of Ann's comments. I wanted to follow up on the issue with the reentry pilot program for housing, which has been, I don't think a single person has qualified, which before anybody gets up in arms, I don't think more than a couple of people have applied. So the marketing of that program is a problem. We're going to talk about that internally a little bit, as well as the process to get through it, which apparently is much more arduous than was originally presented to us. Not at all surprising. But Ann, Jess, and I are going to connect in the coming weeks to look into that and maybe push the state a little bit on that, because it would be a resource for this. Again, I know I messaged you privately, Dr. Payne, about the cost factor. When we were pushing for the release of folks during the COVID lockdown, I worked with a number of our partner reentry programs across the state. We all said basically we can handle this without an increase in funding because it is not a huge number and our services are available. That's depending on what part of the state you're in. That's comprehensive case management, that's housing, that's employment services for those who might qualify or be able to seek employment. And I'll take on the responsibility of reconnecting those folks. And I know don't want to speak for them in advance, but I'm pretty certain they're going to say, once again, yes, we'll gladly take those folks on. And I think we can assume it in the budgets we already have for these programs. So that's one way to counter the argument that might result from a fiscal note that was attached to any potential legislation.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, again, man, DCJ has been involved. Lots of conversations, lots of support with thinking it through strategy, and also thinking through services too. So I appreciate everything. I appreciate everything from everybody, to be honest with you. It's good to really see you all, and good to see that there's so much energy around this. All right, y'all, I'm gonna let y'all go, and we'll be in contact soon. This is the first of several meetings to be had. So, all right, everyone, I want everybody to have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless everybody.